Okay, so the title of the talk I'm going to give today is The Hands Communicate the Language of Our Soul, How the Hands Reveal Our Inner Self. That's a big title, all right? But that's what it's about. Hand reading is something that many people have a lot of uncertainty on or lack of knowledge about, because most of the people think that hands are to do with prediction and fortune telling. Most people think that the lines of the hands are imprinted in your body in some way, possibly by God. If you look at the Bible, that will tell you that. But basically the hands are reflectors of something which is like your destiny or your fate or your karma or something that's fixed and unchanging. And if we look at this hand, we can tell everything that's going to happen to you. We can tell about how long you're going to live. We're going to tell you all the fabulous things that are going to happen to you and all the terrible things that are going to happen to you. And the hands reveal basically all those different parts of that which has been imprinted upon you from birth. But nothing could be further from the truth. Oh. That's completely not what it's about. So what I like to do is I like to give this handout, which I call The Facts About the Myths. So I'll do that now. So take one and pass them back, and then you can have a look at this, and you can keep these, and hopefully it's enough to go around. You at the back, naughty girls at the back. Here you go. All right. So the kind of preoccupation, this idea of looking for the fate in your hand, comes from the notion that the lines of the hand don't change. But the lines of the hand do change. So I'd like you to have a look at the handprint on the back side of that. You'll see this handprint here was basically, it's the same person's hands taken 13 years apart. Now, you don't need to know very much about hand reading to look at that and say, and play the spot the difference. Can anybody see any changes between the lines of the hand that's on the left side as opposed to the lines of the hand on the right side? Can you see any changes?
Top.
Yep, that top line, well done. So you've well spotted this whole line has completely appeared. The one under the fingers, it wasn't there before, and then it's completely appeared in this hand over here. Anything else? Hi, come on in.
The lines around the thumb have disappeared too.
Okay, the lines around the thumb have disappeared, yeah. And you'll notice that all the lines actually have changed in some way, shape or form. You know, they've either changed in length, so look at the line that runs up the middle of the hand towards the middle finger. When that line goes up to what's called the heart line, but in the later handprint it's shorter. Can you see that? Did you notice that? It just only goes up to the first line. It's only got halfway up the hand. So, and if you look at the line that goes across the palm, which we call the headline or the hairline, that line goes across there and drops right down to that bottom of the hand. Can you see that? So this line over here is fairly horizontal, and then on this hand it drops right down through there. So it's grown. So some hands get longer, some lines get longer, some lines get shorter, some lines appear, and some lines disappear. It doesn't really matter the detail of what's happening in this particular case, because what you need to know is the lines of the hands change.
Yes.
All right, so if they change, they couldn't possibly show your fate or your destiny, because by definition, something that is your fate or destiny is something that doesn't change. So it can't possibly show that. So this notion that people have that by looking at the lines of the hand, looking at the lines of the hand, that's somehow going to tell you your fate or your destiny or what's going to happen to you in your life, cannot possibly be true, because the lines wouldn't change if that were true, and the lines do change. So if they do change, then they're showing something else. Okay, we're going to come back to that in a minute, but that's kind of what do they show is then the big question. But the key thing to understand about the lines of the hand is they're not fixed. And therefore, if they're not fixed, it's impossible to do prediction from the lines of the hand. Because it doesn't matter what you think you could possibly say from the hand, you're basically looking at the hand as it is in that given moment. And therefore, you're going to make a decision or an interpretation based on the pattern of the hand you see there. Not there. You couldn't possibly know in advance, oh yeah, of course, your line's going to grow down there. Oh, of course, this is going to happen to you. You're going to completely manifest this. All that line's going to... You couldn't know that in advance. You could make a prediction about if you carry on exactly the same as you are and you don't change, and you carry on eating all that rubbish food, you'll get a heart attack, or whatever. You can make, any prediction you made is basically based upon an assumption that things are going to stay the same. But not only things do they not stay the same, you can't actually predict how they're going to change. So this man, he was a Londoner, he grew up in South London, he left school at 16, uneducated, he went and did a city in guilds in bricklaying. So he became a bricklayer, which is a house builder in England. We don't build houses out of wood, we build them out of bricks. So he became a bricklayer. And in 1972, he decided to become a Zen monk. So he became a Zen monk. And for the next 20 years, 30 years of his life, he would basically had lived in a temple, and he wrote books, and he studied languages, and he ended up translating texts from different languages into English, and wrote 30 books. And so he became very academic and very intellectual, despite the fact that he had no previous schooling or education. And funnily enough, the line that got really long is called the airline, and it's to do with your thinking. So that's exactly what you'd expect for someone. If the line gets longer, it's because they're thinking more deeply about something. They're thinking more investigating things more. They're more interested in understanding the world and what goes on with the world. It's exactly the kind of things that would happen if you actually spent lots of time studying and thinking and reading and writing. Your airline will get longer. But if you'd met the man in 1972, you said, "Oh, you're a fantastic bricklayer. You'll probably run your own bricklaying business soon enough." Like you could see maybe see ambition or whatever in his hand. It will show you that, but it wouldn't tell you, "Oh no. You're going to change your life completely and become a Buddhist monk." You couldn't possibly see that from the hand, So the hand doesn't tell you what the future is. It tells you about what you are at that point in time. So this is really important, and if you think about all the kinds of things that we've been talking about here, we've been talking about the significance of the main lines of the hand. The water line, the air line, the earth line, the minor earth line, which is the one that runs up the middle. These lines change less than all the little subsidiary lines. So I haven't got the handprints here, but if you come to my stall, I can show you the handprints of a young child who was very unwell, and 7 months later, all the indications of the stress and physical ailments in his body have gone. I could show you the handprints of a guy who's got a handprint when he's 29, and again when he's 70, and 41 years, you can see that he was a strapping, healthy young man, and he became an old man, and you can see the deterioration, the degeneration that goes on, partly because of his life changes and partly because of his age. So the hand changes according to who we are and what's going on with us. I did a study a few years ago of the handprints of people who I knew in the 1980s, my sisters, my friends, my sisters, and people who I've still managed to keep in touch with over the years. And that was most of those handprints I took roughly around 1983 to about 1985. And I took those handprints again in 2018. So some of those handprints were 35 years apart. And what was interesting was to see how much the lines of the hands changed over time. And seeing how the lines changed over time, some hands changed a lot, some hands didn't change very much. But those that changed a lot, obviously in terms of their lives, changed their lines of the hands changed a lot. Half a dozen of those women, who were all university educated, they all went and got professional jobs. They had careers as doctors or television producers or computer software programmers and developers. 30 years later, or 25 years later, they were still doing the same job. They were still married to the same person. They'd had kids, and the kids had grown up. But they were basically, their lives hadn't changed much at all during those 30 years. They kind of stayed pretty constantly. So guess what happened to the hands? Not very much. They hadn't changed hardly at all. Exactly. Apart from in one respect. When I first took their handprints, they were in their early 20s. When I second took their handprints, they were in their mid-50s. All of them had gone through menopause. And that was what showed up in their hands. They all had exactly the same features in their hands, lineal changes in the hand, that reflected the endocrinological changes and the hormonal changes that they've been through of that natural aging process. So that's, again, significant, because it's like that's not something that they chose to do, that's just the hand reflecting the changes in their physical body. So the hand will show, for example, illness. If you're ill, the hand will show the marks of the illness. If you're better, then the lines of the hands will change again. So the lines are very much a reflection of what's going on in you right now, and how that changes. And if you change, then that will change psychologically, physiologically, hormonally, emotionally, stress levels. So the lines of the hands will change according to those changes in your life conditions. We can have a handprint. So if you look at the other side of the page now, so the other side of the paper is kind of all those commonly held misunderstandings, you know. So the most famous one is the length of the lines show how long you're going to live. Well, they don't. They really don't. And if you think about it, it would actually kind of be impossible to verify that. Hi, you look like a willing volunteer. So let me read your hand now. I don't know how old you are, let's say you're 45. Okay, so come back and see me in 40 years, or the day before you die, and just keep in touch. And then I can work out whether what I said you're going to die when you're 95. So come back in when you're 94 and 364 days, and then we'll take your handprints again to see if I was right. Okay? No hand reader ever in the history of hand reading has ever done that. How the heck would you know? The only way you could know that you made a prediction like that was actually right is you did a follow-up session. Oh, I see you're going to have 5 babies. Okay, come back to me in 25 years' time and we'll see if I was right. I won't even know you. I might even be a hand reader, but you might die because I missed that one. But like all sorts of things, we'd have to keep in touch. I'd have to keep a record of you, your phone number, and then you'd have to phone me every time you changed your phone number, change address, so I could get back to you in 25. Make a date, come back in 25 years' time. I've done that. I've taken the handprints of people 35 years apart, but that's my sisters and their friends and those family members that you've known since you were 20 that you still know. You probably all do know half a dozen people that you've known 30, 40 years. Fair enough. But random people that you meet on the streets, you go to a mind, body, spirit friend, you meet them once, make sure I get all your details, come back to me in 25 years' time. That would be the only way you could verify whether what you saw in a hand had actually come true. And I can guarantee you, no palmist does that. No palmist. I can't even do that, and I'm assiduous. Most hand readers, and the second thing is, you'd have to take a handprint. You'd have to take a handprint before and a handprint after. Most palmists don't take handprints. Okay, if you don't have a handprint, you've got no idea what the lines of the hands are like any particular time. Therefore, you cannot compare them. All right? So that's your kind of rule of thumb. I don't do handprints when I'm here because we haven't got time. It takes 20 minutes to take a handprint. But basically, when I do a hand reading, a proper hand reading, I take handprints. And I give you a copy of the handprints. I've got lots of people all around the world whose handprints I took 30 years ago. And hopefully they've still kept them. And I said, keep this just in case you go and see a hand reader. Sometimes you can compare the difference. But unless you can actually take a handprint and take a snapshot of what the lines of the hands are like at a particular point in time, you couldn't possibly know whether they've changed or not, and you've got no way of evaluating that. So the whole notion that you can do prediction from the lines of the hand is completely wrong in so many ways. It's wrong morally. If I say to you, this is your future, where's your responsibility in that? Where's your choice in creating the reality that you inhabit? If it's a divinely ordained fate, there's nothing you can do about it, so you might as well give up. It's like, no, that's not a very positive message. That's not really helpful, We want to try to give a bit more helpful encouragement, enable people to make choices that they want to make. And so it's morally reprehensible, it's empirically impossible to verify, and because of the lines of the hands change, it's actually technically impossible to do. So please, if you ever see a palmist and they say, I do predictions and I tell the future, just walk away. Just say, yeah, whatever. Because if you realise that the lines of the hands change, you now know more about hand reading than any palmist who does prediction from the hands. Why? Either they don't know that the lines change, in which case they're not really very good at their study, are they? Well, you don't know that the lines, you didn't know that? Well, I've seen evidence of it. I've got proof. And they don't know that. What kind of serious study have they done with it on their hands? Nothing at all. Or they do know that the lines change, and somehow they're sort of fudging that one or ignoring it or pretending it didn't really exist. In other words, they're lying in some kind of way, and so because what they're interested in doing is impressing people. I mean, I teach hand reading, I've just decided to start teaching online, and I'm being bombarded by these people who want to know how to do prediction from the lines of the hand. It's like, no, and again, no. And the thing is, what's interesting about those people is it's quite evident that when you're talking with them that they're only interested in power. They're only interested in control. They're usually egotistical males. That goes without saying, really, but I thought I should say that. But basically, they're interested in power over. You know, when I read a hand, it's got nothing to do with me, really. I mean, I'm a map reader, so it's the analogy I like to use. But it's all about you. It's all about you understanding yourself. So when you kind of say, well, what is a hand reading for then? A hand reading is basically to give you self-understanding and self-knowledge. The hand shows your personality. The hand shows motivational forces that are within your consciousness that make you the person that you are, that give you the kind of drives, interests, orientations, habits, skills. I mean, you can literally see people's like innate skills and talents in their hand. And these are the forces that within each of us that kind of enable us to manifest ourselves in the world in some kind of way. What do the hands do? The hands do everything. There's nothing we don't do in the world which we don't do with our hands in some way, whether it's writing or playing a musical instrument or painting or we use our hands to be the instruments of our self-expression. Like whatever idea you've got in here, it's going to be made out there, whether it's digging a hole and putting a fence post in or whether it's making a movie. It's all the hands are the means by which we communicate with the world. It's how that we communicate with each other. Hi, how you doing? Let's shake hands and make a connection. You know, the hands, the power of touch. There's a lot of healers today here in this space, so you know, it's all about the touch and the connection that we make. The hand is an incredibly intimate surface. The palm of the hand is an incredibly intimate surface. And it's curious to me how people always say things like, oh, I know myself like the back of my hand. It's not the back of your hand you need to know. It's the front of your hand that you need to know. It's the palmar surface. And it's not just the lines. It's not just the lines. The lines are not the most important thing on the hand because they change, exactly. So what features on your hands don't change? Fingerprints. Well done. Okay. Does everybody know this fact? Is anybody not sure about this idea that fingerprints don't change? Did you know that? Cool. What else do you know about the fingerprints?
They're individual.
They're individual. That's a really important point. So the fingerprint patterns are not only permanent markers on our palm, they're also unique to each of us as individuals. We all know this because the police know this. You've got the FBI hat on there, so you're clearly a spy. So the police know that the fingerprint patterns are unique, and they know that there's a script, and therefore that they don't change, and therefore they're constant over time. Do you know when the police first adopted fingerprinting as a technique for forensic purposes? Any idea, roughly? 1653, 1827, or 1967? Which one? No, 1901. No, I didn't give you that option. But it wasn't that. It's not that long ago. It's about 120 years ago, basically. So fingerprints, the significance of fingerprints were not identified until the 1890s. That's when the major research was started to be done on them, and that's when they verified that fingerprint patterns could be used for identification purposes because they don't change. But what's interesting is most of the books on palmistry that most palmists follow were written before 1890, and they don't talk about fingerprint patterns in those books. So if you ever get a book on handreading, if you ever find a book on palmistry you think it might be worth looking at, there's only one that I recommend, but apart from that, it's not written by me either, by the way. Check and see if they talk about fingerprint patterns. Because if they don't talk about fingerprint patterns, they're kind of really missing something that's really important. What's interesting about fingerprint patterns is these have been proven and shown to have genetic significance. So these are something that's like an expression of the genetic forces. Now that's a very strong motivational force within our lives. And if you look at the fingerprint patterns in different racial groups, for example, like Māori have a lot more whorls than Europeans. Europeans have a lot more loops than Māori. And what you find if you look in different families, you'll find that fingerprint patterns run in chains. So you'll find the same fingerprint patterns being passed down through families. So we know there's a strong genetic component in the fingerprint pattern. And the fingerprint patterns really show what I call them motivational dispositions. They show what the sort of impulses that motivate us, and as a consequence of that, out of that comes particular habits, particular ways of being, particular ways of organising society and culture, which is why you have a culture clash when you had in 1836 when Māori were here and Europeans came. It's a completely different orientation towards how to understand the world. And fingerprint patterns that are dominant in Māori and how Māori want to organise things are completely different from the way that Europeans do. And that's actually reflected in the dominance of the fingerprint pattern types that's different amongst those two different peoples. So you can see that at a collective level as well as an individual level, and that's really fascinating. The anthropology of fingerprints is extraordinary. So this is not me, this is all scientists, they do all this stuff. They go around taking large samples of populations all around the world and working out which fingerprints occur more commonly amongst which peoples. But from an individual basis, the individual fingerprints that you've got will be descriptive, very powerfully descriptive of your personal psychology and your personal motivations. All right? Now, what's interesting about the fingerprint patterns in relationship to the lines is you've got a difference here between nature and nurture. Okay? So the hand is really powerful in that respect, because it shows the things that you've inherited, things that are genetic, which is shown by things like the fingerprint patterns, but they also show, your hands also show your experiences. And that's what the lines show. The lines show what your experiences in life are. So if you're living life as a bricklayer, you've got a certain set of hands. If you're living a life as a scholastic Buddhist monk, then the lines will change, reflecting that. So the lines show the experiences you've had in life. And then there's also a certain kind of other quality, I like to say. So the hand is made up of 3 different components. And what's interesting when you look at people's hands is you can look at the hand and see what their experiences have been. You can look at what their genetic patterns are, and you can look at what they brought into this life, which has nothing to do with their parents and nothing to do with their experience. It's kind of an interesting tripartite confection when you look at people's hands, and what's an admixture of all those 3 things. So whilst you can't see the future in the hand, you can actually see the past. You can see, for example, the most potent thing you can see in the hand is childhood experiences. So you can see, for example, family relationships. You can see how your parents were, how they brought you up, what kind of influence they've had on you, what was the relationship you had with your father, what was the relationship you had with your mother. You can see intergenerational trauma in the hand as well. So you can see trauma that you experienced as a child, but not only experience that you've experienced, but that your mother experienced or your grandmother experienced as well. So the 2 hands reflect like that, sort of that. Your active hand represents your life as you've experienced it, and the passive hand represents what you've inherited through your whakapapa. So you actually can see intergenerational trauma in the hand as well.
So the active hand is the hand that you write with?
Yeah, the dominant hand, exactly. The
dominant hand is what?
The dominant hand is the active hand. Right. So it's really interesting though. So whilst you can't see the past, you can see the effects of those kind of experiences in childhood. And one of the most potent things that I work with when I'm reading hands is actually managing and acknowledging and healing that trauma by talking about that trauma. And it's an extraordinary potent thing to have, to see that when you can see it actually recorded in your hands. So I did a hand reading this morning for a young man, 21-year-old, so it wasn't about trauma for him in his particular case, but I literally spent 15 minutes just talking about one fingerprint pattern, one on his index fingers. And that basically described, that's exactly what he needs to hear about the dynamic that's going on within him about that, and how that's affecting him in his life. So it's really kind of it's a really powerful tool for articulating to yourself the nature of your experience and the nature and where those things have come from. If you've had adverse childhood experiences, how have they impacted you? How have they affected you? How have they made decisions in your life or influenced the decision making in life? For example, where to live or what jobs to do. If you're running away from trauma, you might not want to stay near where that trauma happened. Or patterns where parents would encourage children to do certain kinds of things. Like a very good friend of mine, her father was a NASA engineer, so he encouraged her to do scientific stuff, and she ended up becoming a doctor. But she's actually an artist. She's like an extraordinary painter, and but she's never done any painting until she got to 57. Wow. So your life kind of got derailed because of well-intentioned but erroneous advice from parents who said, "Oh, you should do that." It's like, well, that's not who I am. That's not my skill set. It's not my interest. And sometimes economic circumstances will dictate that, other than things. But if you've got kind of skills and potentials, and you can see those in the hand, this is something you can actually give very concrete advice for vocational guidance for people in looking at the hands. So, just to summarise, the hand will show not your fate, not your destiny, but it can show the motivational forces that affect your psychology. It can show the kind of experiences you've had in childhood and how that's affected your temperament and personality. It can show skill sets, abilities, and gifts, talents, which can therefore be very helpful from a vocational point of view. It can show your emotional orientation, your emotional experiences. It can show things like what kind of your needs are in a relationship and what for relationship compatibility. And it can show things like your health and your menopause changes or health changes that are happening in the hand as well. So the hand gives access to all that kind of information. It's a veritable matrix of your whole being. It's on the end of your arm. It's attached to you. How could it not be an expression of who and what you are? So, I'm going to give you short hand readings here, 15 minutes or half an hour, a bit long if you want, but basically that's the thing. A full hand reading takes about 2 hours, and I'm obviously not doing that in this space, but if that's of interest to you, you can get my card and give me a call. I actually came up to Whangarei yesterday and did 2 hand readings yesterday, so I'm happy to do that. I'm coming up from Auckland. I have a YouTube channel, Master Hand Reader, and I have a Facebook page, and I have an Instagram page if you do that. But the YouTube channel you probably find the most interesting because there's lots of videos on there, little short presentations I've given about the hand and what the hand means, what the different parts of the hand are, what they mean, what they signify. You'll find that more illuminating. So if you want to watch all that, you can do that. But I'm happy to take any questions if you have any questions.